Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. On behalf of the Swiss Clinical Trial Organization and its Clinical Trial Unit Network, I would like to welcome all of you to this online course this afternoon, PPI in a nutshell. My name is Cordula Landgraf, and I'm responsible for communications and stakeholder engagement at the SCTO at the Executive Office here in Bern. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-speaker, Dr. Silke Ludwig. Silke comes from the Clinical Trial Center at the University Hospital of Zurich, and Silke is Head of Education and Training and also Head of Science Communications at the CTC there. Unfortunately, I have to excuse my colleague Tamara Kohler today on short notice. She is not available. She is our Patient and Public Involvement Manager at the SCTO. Before we start, I have some housekeeping for you. So please write your questions in the chat or raise your hand via the Zoom hand that you can raise. We have a dedicated question and answer session where you can then address the question. And as I said, either write it in the chat or raise your hand, and we will then take your question up. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. You can, of course, turn your camera off during the presentations, but when you ask a question, it would be nice if we could see you, and then please turn the camera on again. You might have seen it already. This course is recorded, and we will publish the recording after the event on our SCTO website. Our course today addresses the planning phase of patient and public involvement. When you, as an applicant, when you apply for an IICT 2020 call. So this call is issued by the Swiss National Science Foundation, and the scope of our course today is clearly the planning phase. The target audience are clinical research professionals. So this is the focus. Please note that this is not a course, not a training on all aspects of implementing PPI in academic clinical research. We will really look at the planning phase. I will use PPI during this presentation, and the meaning is patient and public involvement. With regard to the objectives of this course, we would be happy if we could convey the overall concept of PPI to you and help you or support you in translating the PPI principles to your study, to your project. And in the end, you should be able to develop a PPI plan for the IICT 2022 call. Please also note, this is what I wanted to address too on the last slide. Sorry, I go back. We will not discuss other sections of the IICT call today. This course is clearly dedicated towards patient and public involvement, and we will stick to the PPI requirements. The course is split into 3 parts. The first one will address the overall concept and set the scene for what we discuss afterwards. In the second part, we will look at the IICT call proposal, and here especially at the letter of intent and the application template and what you need to address with regard to the PPI requirement. After a short break, my colleague Silke will take over with some practical examples, practical considerations, and coordination information for you. We finish with a question and answer session at around 3 o'clock. So that's the program for today. Why are we at the SCTO talking about the subject of PPI, about patient involvement? Well, if you look on our website for our strategic priorities, patient involvement is one of them. And for the funding period 2021 to 2022, it's one of our key goals, key objectives. When we talk about involvement in this course, we mean that patients and members of the public are actively involved, actively engaged in clinical research projects as full partners. In contrast to this, participation means that patients or members of the public take part in a clinical trial. Usually they do so by providing their health data. So we make a clear distinction between the two terms. And when talking about patients, I refer to the rather broad definition that also UParty is using. And this means that patients can be individual patients, it can be the public in general, patient representatives from patient organizations, caregivers, family members, patient advocates, and patient experts. Altogether, I refer to this group as PPI contributor. So this is in terms of terminology that will be used in this course. There is no harmonized definition or harmonized terminology with regard to patient and public involvement yet. So for the moment, it's not harmonized internationally or globally. We at the SCTO, we follow the definition by Involve. Involve is a UK government-funded program under the National Institute for Health Research. So when we talk about PPI in clinical research, it's research that is carried out with or by members of the public rather than to, about, or for them. And what is very important for us is the partnership approach. And that I think is nicely depicted here on the picture. The researcher welcomes the patient brings real life expertise, experience, and helps to keep research grounded and realistic. For us in clinical research here in Switzerland, the concept of PPI is rather new. So there is the legitimate question why we should do it, why should we implement it? And here I would like to draw you to two perspectives. Actually, the first one is looking at the question from an ethical perspective. Patients are those that are directly affected by the outcome of clinical research. And therefore, you can argue that they should have an influence on the research along the motto, nothing about us without us. Or to put it short, today's research is tomorrow's medicine or tomorrow's therapy. In this sense, there is an ethical requirement or there's an ethical argument to have PPI. PPI also supports the empowerment of patients and addresses their right to have a voice in clinical research. And from a transparency perspective, it helps foster the dialogue between the two parties, between the research community and the patient, the public in general. And last but not least, we should not forget that clinical research, at least academic clinical research, is funded by public money. And here PPI can help to make the funding more transparent, to account for this funding, and to involve those that actually pay for it in the end. And that's the taxpayer, that's you and me and the public in general. From the perspective of direct benefits for your study or for your project, PPI can help improve the relevance of your research question or your research agenda. For example, you could involve patients to identify the research questions or questions that matter most to them, or they could help you prioritize the research agenda and really identify what needs to be addressed, maybe an unmet medical need or a question that has not been addressed before. There is already evidence in the literature that PPI can improve recruitment rates. So you could connect with patients and they help you to find appropriate patient communities. And by spreading the word, your recruitment rate could be improved, could get higher, and involve those that you really need in this study. Regarding retention rate, the literature is a little more limited, but there is a hint to that it can also improve your retention rate, so keeping your participants in the study. Regarding transparency and improvement of the relation between research community and patients and the public, you could, for example, involve patients and ask them to help you disseminate the study results to a wider public, or help drafting the study results in lay language. So these are benefits, more direct ones, directly affecting your study, your project. There are different methods for actively involving patients, and an essential aspect in the selection of the right or the appropriate method is actually the level of involvement. Yeah, the intensity of involvement that you want to apply. And here you can categorize this involvement into 4 levels. The first one on the basis here is that the patient provides information, maybe about his disease or her disease. A step higher would be giving advice, so respond to specific questions or provide general advice on a topic, be it on a specific disease, or how they live with the disease, or how much risk they are willing to take for a certain therapy. A step further on is number 3, that would be joint decision-making. So here the patients would contribute at decision-making level, maybe as a full member of a steering committee, an advisory board, or whatever. And last but not least, on top is leadership. In this case, the patient would take over or lead specific parts of your project initiative. These are the levels of involvement, and I will come back to that later. We will need this categorization later on. The level of involvement should also be taken into account when you try to find your PPI contributor. And here I have to be honest and to be sincere, there is no one-stop shop at the moment where you could send your request to, and then this body or this organization would do the matchmaking for you. The Swiss Clinical Trial Organization, we are working on such a plan to establish a PPI hub, but it's not there at the moment. So for the moment, our recommendations for you, how to find a PPI contributor, are listed here on the slides. First of all, we would advise you to align internally. So contact your CTU, contact maybe participants in a past study. Maybe they would be willing to get involved in another study that you are planning or preparing. Identify and contact relevant patient organization. That's another possibility. If you have a study in a certain therapeutic indication, a therapeutic field, there might be a patient organization active there. You could also post a call for interest on your website, on social media channels. We have seen that also. You can contact us at the SCTO and ask for our support. And you could check our PPI mapping. I will explain later on what this is. It's on our website, and it maps all the existing initiatives and projects that are already existing in Switzerland with regard to PPI in academic clinical research. There is also UParty Switzerland, and you could ask UParty, the network, also for helping you in finding the appropriate contributor. And last but not least, again here, UParty has a new tool. This tool is called UParty Connect, and this tool comes from the UParty Foundation, so from the overarching European body. And this tool is actually a matchmaking platform where you as a researcher could find somebody from the patient side, but also vice versa. Yeah, I have to say that this tool is rather new, and so the number of patients from Switzerland entered into this platform is rather low at the moment. So if you are looking for somebody here in Switzerland, you will not find a lot of PPI contributors at the moment. We, of course, hope that this will change and that more people come into the platform. When you approach or follow one of these recommendations, what you should have in place or what you should develop is information material to clearly explain your research project in lay language so that a patient can understand what you are suggesting, what you are planning to do. You should also identify the role of your PPI contributor. What do you expect from him? Is it giving advice, or would you like to include him in a decision-making body? Then it would be helpful if you could specify the skills and capacities you are looking for with regard to your PPI contributor. What should he or she be able to do? And again here, regarding the skills and capacities, I will come back to this issue later on. And also, it is helpful if you provide some information on the timing and the amount of work, as well as remuneration. So are you able to compensate for the PPI activity? How much work should a PPI contributor expect? Yeah, this is helpful for any person who might be willing to support you in your project. Now I have talked quite a lot about the overall principle and some background information. Where can you find more information about this? The SCTO now has a dedicated website. It's called Patient and Public Involvement, and it's directly accessible via the link that is given below. Here you find a fact sheet, and the fact sheet explains the overall concept, benefits, challenges, how you can incorporate into your clinical trial. This fact sheet is available in the languages German, French, and English. In close collaboration with the Swiss National Science Foundation, we have also drafted and developed a guide for researchers with the objective in mind to support you to identify PPI opportunities that really inspire an effective and meaningful involvement of patients. The scope also of this guide is clearly the planning phase. For the moment, it's not a comprehensive guidance for the implementation of PPI. What is important to consider, and we will see this later when we look at examples, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. So PPI really has to fit to your project, and it's up to you to characterize your project and to decide what fits best within your trial. In the guide, we have also dedicated one section to potential pitfalls, so statements that would not qualify as PPI, what should be avoided, or how you could then improve it to make it pass the grant approval. This here is a graphical design for possibilities of PPI. before, during, and after your clinical study. And this is also an attachment to the fact sheet and to the guide for researchers. So when you start the upper right-hand side, it starts with the identification of the research question, goes through study design, funding, application. That's what we will look at a little bit closer today. Then, of course, the management process, the study process, data analysis. I'm now moving towards the left-hand side, dissemination and implementation, and last but not least, evaluation. And here the evaluation means evaluating the patient and public involvement itself to come to a conclusion regarding what impact the involvement of patients had on your overall project or study. I will refer to this graphic once we go along and once we look at concrete examples. Another document I would like to address is the SCTO remuneration policy for PPI activities. We were thinking that if we want to implement PPI in a sustainable way, we are of the opinion that this needs a clear commitment to remunerate PPI contributors. So our policy outlines our commitment to reimburse for travel, accommodation, hotel, if applicable, and compensate the activity itself. And we have based our remuneration on a so-called blended model, where we take two criteria into consideration. The first is the level of involvement. We've seen that on the slides before, from 1 to 4. And then the skills and capacities that you need or that the PPI contributor needs to fulfill the activity. And I will explain this policy a little later when we look at a concrete example, what that means or how you could use the policy. Of course, it's a policy for the SCTO. It's on the website, so you can have a look at it, how we are doing it. It's not a guideline, it's a policy. So up to you to draw up your own policy or whatever you think suitable. If you look for specific case studies, examples of what is already done in the SCTU network, I would like to recommend to have a look at our Regulatory Affairs Watch, the issue from October last year. We dedicated the whole Regulatory Affairs Watch to the topic of PPI. You will find a case study from the University Hospital of Geneva, but also from the DKF in Basel. You will have a deep dive into a regulatory perspective on PPI. It's really a nice overview if you are interested in this topic. And with this, I would like to move to the project I have mentioned in the introduction, the PPI mapping. This was actually our first step to identify and characterize PPI initiatives and projects that we already have in Switzerland. The scope is clearly academic clinical research, and the objective was to establish the status quo, so to avoid any duplication of average and also to leverage resources and what is already there, maybe to base our further next steps on this basis. We did a survey and sent this survey to both patients and research professionals via our network, but also via social media and our website. And now what I would like to show you, we identified a total of 45 initiatives and projects spread over the whole of Switzerland. And those results are now published in detail on our website. And this is really new. It has just been uploaded last week. It is available in the languages English, French, and German. And if you click on a name, name for the initiative or project, you will find more information about the organization, about the level of PPI, and if the organization agreed, there is also the contact information given. So I invite you to check this mapping maybe after our course. If you have an initiative or a project that is not included, please feel free to get in contact with us, because this is not meant to be a static website. So we of course we will monitor this and include other projects as they come along and as they are introduced. And with this, I stop, or I finish the first part, the introduction and the overall concept of PPI, and I'm happy to take your questions now. I think there are already some questions in the chat. Let's see, I quickly go to the chat.
No, not at the moment. No
not question. At the moment, okay. I see a lot of...
yeah, there's a fact sheet and everything. So.
Okay, thanks a lot, Silke.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, you can raise your hand or just speak up. No questions? I wait a little longer, maybe we get something in the chat. There is a question from Zamia, who is asking, are we really allowed to use social media to search for PPI? Is it okay with the ethics committees, I think? This is the question. Zamia, would you like to speak up and explain a little bit more in detail what you mean?
Hi, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. You said at one point that we can use social media to search for PPI contributors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the ethics committee will allow this kind of way of searching for these people? Because social media, I don't know if it's really allowed or not.
What would be your constraints, or why do you think this would pose a problem?
Yeah, we are always afraid about social media because you have this, we have, they are, you search for patients or their families, and how, it will be an ad, or in which way that we can just put an ad in the social media, or we can say we have a project and we are searching for these kind of people. How you think we can do it without that the ethics committee will say it's not ethical, we cannot contact people in this way, because there is a privacy, and social media in general, it's not really, it doesn't respect the privacy.
I think what I mean here is that you can post a call of interest via social media. Of course, then if somebody would be interested to support you as a PPI contributor, then you would get in contact with this person directly via private email. Yeah, this would not go anymore about social media. But I personally, I do not see any reason why you should not transparently ask for a PPI contributor.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But maybe we have somebody on the call who is more competent with ethics committees and would like to speak up. Anybody from an ethics committees or who has experience? If you include patients in your study, this is not subject to approval by an ethics committee, because it's not the participant, it's not a participant. Yeah, that's why I yeah, I insist on this clear distinction between PPI contributor, so the ones that are involved in your study, but they contribute to your study in terms of giving advice regarding the study protocol, and those that participate as, in former times, we called them study subjects. Yeah, but that's not a nice word. Therefore, I would like to call them study participants. There is a question by Maria. Maria?
Yes, good morning. Yes, good morning. I would like to, talking about the involvement of patients, could you please elaborate a little bit the borders between involving patients for advice and involving patients for the decision-making process?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Decision-making process is higher on the level of involvement. And that would be typically if you have like an advisory board in your trial and you have a patient representative as a full member. And this patient representative, this PPI contributor, would have a voting right as all the other members in your board, in your advisory board or committee, whatever you call it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cordula, we have one more question from Mark Forza.
Yeah.
Mark, do you want to speak up yourself or should I take your question?
Yep, maybe yes. I think it's, hi Cordula, thanks for this training. I think it's almost the same without maybe to not to target directly social media, but it's also about privacy. When interacting with patients, you can either interact, I would say, on an individual basis, or as, for instance, as groups of patients. But nevertheless, group of patients, it's maybe a place where personal data, for instance, regarding their medical history could be shared. Would you see any issue with that, or any, it's a bit like also the question about ethical committees we would like to have on board to answer this. Would you foresee any issue in having patients to work as a group and to share their experience, or is it strictly, I would say, on a voluntary basis, so not an issue?
Yeah, what I would suggest, Mark, in any case, when you set up such a group of PPI contributors, that you draw a kind of agreement between all of them that what is discussed stays confidential. So kind of confidentiality agreement or arrangement, anything like that. I would strongly advise to do such a thing. And if you enter into patient and public involvement, you should be clear upfront on the role the patient contributor is expected to fulfill, the compensation. You agree on the hours, and for this you would need like an agreement, an arrangement, and here you should specify how you deal with confidential questions, confidential data, privacy issues, and that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Excellent.
Hello, this is Aurélie. May I just ask a question regarding a technical issue? You mentioned, Cordula, that it's better to develop information material to provide the PPI contributor. Is it planned that the CTO will develop such a template for this kind of documentation or not?
Yeah, I was nearly expecting such questions.
Sorry.
And no, it's good that they come because they confirm that there is a need. And what we will look into is like a template for such an arrangement. My last answer to Mark, but also a template like you mentioned now, that makes sense. And it is
to guide
not
investigators.
Now, but we will look into it. Yeah.
As we as CTO it's better to have also a based material to help the investigator who will come to the CTUs.
Yeah, no, that's clearly a task we have to
the
deal
PPI
with.
hub.
What is what I would like to do is that maybe we at the SCTO we take the lead, but then we have a group and a representative from each CTU, CTC, and then we discuss in this group regarding the templates, and we have a consultation so that your input is also taken when we develop those templates.
Okay, thanks.
No further question in the chat, Cordula.
Thank you, Silke. Okay, then I think we go on to the second part. We are well in time. So we continue with the second part of this course, and this is where we will actually look at the PPI requirements in the Swiss National Science Foundation's IICT call for this year. It's actually the second time that the SNSF has included the PPI requirement in the call. The first time was last year. This year is the second time, but what is new is that it also has to be addressed in the letter of intent. So the PPI requirement is both in the letter of intent and the application for the grant itself. For both parties, for the Swiss National Science Foundation and for the applicant, for the research community, this is new territory we are embarking on. So having said this, not everything will be perfect from the start. And I think what is important, however, is that we start including patients in our project, in our research, and that we learn as we go along. And this is also shared by the SNSF. They do not expect you to be perfect in your letter of intent with regard to PPI, nor in the application, but they expect you to address the topic and find a possibility to have PPI in your project or study. And the scope is the whole life cycle of your project, of your study. Here again, I refer to the graphic from the fact sheet and the guide. It's actually in all studies, in all phases of your study. Today, we focus on the first two. And when the SNFS is talking about patients, they also use the broad definition. So a patient can be patient individual, caregiver, member of family, and so on. So they follow the same definition as the SCTO. What is new this year in the call is the so-called preparatory grant that you can request, and this is a sum of up to 5,000 Swiss francs that you can request for patient involvement in the planning phase. The objective of this grant is to support all activities during which patient representatives provide input for your development of the grant application, including the study protocol. So what you need to specify, or what you should specify, is the compensation for the time spent on providing input, giving advice, or other activities, and the reimbursement of the travel costs you have, or the travel costs patient contributors might have, expenses you might have. If you consider a face-to-face meeting, you might need a room for that. This is all money that you could put into this preparatory grant budget. What do you have to do to get this preparatory grant? You have to outline the budget in the patient engagement plan in your letter of intent. And we will look that we will look at that in the following slides. But with regard to the timeline, first I would like to mention the letter of intent has to be submitted latest until the 20th of May. So this is the deadline for the letter of intent. In the letter of intent, you already address PPI, and how you do it, I will explain in the slides that come later. Then the SNSF will open up the preparatory grant from the 1st of June. So from the 1st of June, you can submit a request to get this grant of up to 5,000 Swiss franc. And you should get an answer to this request until the end of June. The preparatory grant itself then will run from the 1st of July until the end of October. The deadline for the IICT proposal itself is the 1st of November. So you see the preparatory grant covers the 4 months in between July and end of October. And this money is dedicated for your PPI activities. That's in terms of timelines. Now, what do you have to address in your letter of intent? First of all, the information has to be provided in a tabular overview. And this is the tabular overview here on the slides that you have to fill in. In the first column, it's the activity. And here you identify and describe the PPI activities you want to do in the planning phase. So what do you do to involve patients? Then on the next column, it's the role of the PPI contributor. And here you need to describe the concrete task for the PPI contributor and what you expect from them. So what is the PPI contributor expected to do? What is his role or her role? Then comes the objective of the activity. So why do you involve patients? What is the benefit added value you want to achieve? And then comes the so-called preparatory budget. And this is only the budget for the preparatory grant here. It's not the budget for your whole study. Yeah, this is the difference to the proposal itself that comes later. To calculate the budget for the preparatory grant, you have to think about compensation. How much hours would you need the patient contributor to do the activities? Do you propose on an hourly basis, or do you have, like, let's say, half day, whatever? And do you have reimbursement? Does the contributor need to travel? Do you need any accommodation, hotel, meals, face-to-face meetings? And for this, if you plan something like this, you have a preparatory grant to pay for. And that's new this year. So coming again to the graphic, we are now looking at the first two parts, the identification and the study design and funding application. I think this has been very theoretical up to now. Often something gets clearer if we look at an example. And now I would like to go through 3 examples of what you could suggest here in the planning phase. The first example is the possibility to involve patients to identify the research question or questions. As activity, you could specify that you consult with local or national patient representatives and then you name them to define the research questions. Please clearly specify the scope and the form you are doing this. So for example, you do an online survey or you plan interviews or whatever you think is best in your case. Then you describe the role of the PPI contributor. So what input into your research question do you want? maybe taking into account the experience of the PPI contributor living with the disease, with the condition? Or do you want to ask him or her a specific question about how much risk he or she would be willing to take? Yeah, please specify concretely what you expect from the PPI contributor. The objective in our case would be to ensure that the research questions is relevant to patients, that it reflects their needs. Regarding the budget, you would, let's say you have decided for an online survey, then you would need to calculate the time for the PPI contributor to fill out the survey, how many hours. You could decide for an hourly compensation rate. You calculate how many surveys you want to do. And all this sums up to your budget, to your preparatory grant budget. First example. The second example relates to study endpoints. Again, the activity needs to be as precise and concrete as possible. You consult again with local or national patient representatives, you specify them, you ask them whether the endpoints you propose, are they meaningful from a patient perspective. The PPI contributor would be expected to provide advice on your proposed study endpoints, maybe regarding general health improvement or the improvement of the quality of life. As objective, in our case, we would have to ensure that the study endpoints are appropriate and meaningful to answer the research questions. Maybe your study has the potential to be a game changer and address an unmet medical need. If so, you state it here. And again, you calculate the budget. Here, you would need to reflect on the time to review the draft study protocol. Maybe you have a face-to-face meeting where you explain your overall concept and where you discuss face-to-face with the PPI contributors. This is a little bit up to you, how you define the measures and the methods you use. The third example, I've taken the lay summary of your study concept. This is not the lay summary of your study results, but it's actually the study concept. And this is what you have to provide in the application itself, in the section 2 of the IICT call application. And then again, you go through the different columns of your table. The role of the PPI contributor here could be that you ask him or her to review the draft lay summary, provide feedback, whether it is understandable, readable for the general public. You could also ask him to write certain paragraphs, him or herself. That's depending a little bit on your project. The objective in our case would be to increase transparency, foster dialogue between public and the research community. And again, you do your reflections on the budget. Now we've looked at the examples, and you will surely have one question that is now imminent, and this is, how do I calculate the amount of compensation? So how much do I compensate for a PPI activity? And this is where our policy on PPI remuneration comes into play. And as I've said before, we have a blended model that we use to come to a certain amount. So what do? First, you look at the level of involvement. Is it number 1? Is it 2, 3, or 4? That's the first criterion. Then you have a second one, and the second one relates to the skills and the resources needed. The skills and resources needed can be divided or can be categorized into actually 4 sections. It can be medical experience you need, systems experience, methodological experience, or also a kind of personal framework experience. Yeah, a medical experience could be that your contributor, your PPI contributor, is familiar with a certain disease or his disease if he's affected himself or herself. And yeah, systems expertise could be to be familiar with the healthcare system in Switzerland or with the regulatory system or whatever. According to this table, you can rate the skills and resources you need from low to intermediate to high. And then the rule of thumb would apply. The higher the level of involvement, the higher the skills and resources you need, the higher the amount you pay. And now I think if I stopped here, you would ask me, yeah, well, what does that all mean? How do I calculate now? This is why I want to discuss an example. Let me explain by using an example. So in our case, let's say the PPI contributor reviews study material. Let's say the informed consent and provides feedback. Regarding the level of involvement, this would fall within category number 2. So providing advice, giving input to a certain question or to a certain document. Within this category, compensation could range from 55 to around 100 Swiss francs. This is based on examples that I found in the literature, but also on my personal experience. And I have to admit that also my personal experience at the moment is limited. So please be aware that is an assumption here. Yeah. And as we gather further experience with PPI, we might go back and also revise or adjust our policy. That's not written in stone here. When you have decided upon the level of involvement, you look at the skills and the capacities your PPI contributor should bring. And in our case, as you review study material, maybe you come to the conclusion it's quite necessary that he brings some medical skills, and you rate them as intermediate. And then, based on the 2 criteria, you could come to a conclusion that for this specific task, you compensate with 90 Swiss franc. Yeah. It is not a perfect calculation. I have to admit this. And it's not an equation where you put numbers and you get a nice outcome. This is not the case here. But it takes 2 important factors into account: the level of involvement and the skills that are needed. And in my opinion, it's the fairest model that we can propose at the moment. Maybe I quickly stop here because I see that there is something in the chat.
I just pointed in a question because I'm not sure if you said something about the preparatory grant. Which format should the grant be submitted? Because you have an format for the letter of intent for the full proposal, but we haven't got anything about the preparatory grant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't find that on the internet, but I checked with the SNF, and for the moment they have not specified the format. But what they will do is when the letter of intent has been submitted, they will open a submission in my SNF, and then they will define the format for the preparatory grant.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, that will still come. That's not there for the moment.
Already. Right. Thank you. Sandra, do you want to speak up?
Yeah, hello. I was just wondering, the rates that you are giving here in this example, is it actually meant per hour of work been done, or is it the total rate that you are meaning here?
Sorry, Sandra. Yeah, it should actually read here amount in Swiss franc per hour. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Per hour. Yeah, sorry. It's confusing, yeah. But you are completely right.
Okay, then Natalie, do you want to speak up? You raised your hand quite early already. So.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, the question that I have is for the actual proposal, which we have to submit by, I guess, November 1st. So I was wondering, would it be possible for us to also show some preclinical data, or it should be just focused on the clinical trial design? Because if we show some preclinical data, then it would probably would be some sort of a proof that this therapeutic modality works, and now we want to take it into clinical trials. So I wasn't able to find any information, or actually I saw it on the website that it was saying we shouldn't include any preclinical data. So I just wanted to make sure what would be the rule. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. I think you have to address it to the Swiss National Science Foundation directly, because in this call we are just dealing with the PPI requirement. I cannot answer any other questions that regard other aspects of the call. But in the end, I will show you a slide where you get the information to contact the SNSF. Yeah,
that would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, but
no worries. Thanks a lot.
And
Mark raising a question or having the hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I think I already raised the question in another meeting. My question is, how can we practically compensate patients for time providing input? This is not about reimbursement relying on receipt, that you reimburse receipt. So you have to set up in the agreement the rate,
yes.
and then how to pay to an individual from an institution. And this is maybe not the same depending on the institution, but you have to, for an institution, it's easy to pay a service to a commercial structure. So someone being registered as providing services. To an individual, I'm still a bit interrogative about it.
Silke, would you like to address this, or?
I could try, but I understand your concern, and I can just say, you know, I can come back to you in a few months' time and can tell you about my experience, because we are starting now reimbursing. So I don't know yet. I'm trying to find out right now how we do reimburse our patients. So that's a good point you raised, Mark. Yeah, it's quite hurdleful. You have to have kind of, if you have an agreement, it probably helps. I think through the or I expect through the university payment or university hospital payment, it will cover everything they need to then to pay the patients. I hope so, yeah. But I haven't got the answer right now. I'm sorry.
As a similar, I would say, situation, when a patient or a healthy volunteer is part of a study, we are mostly, maybe there are also some other way to deal with it, but mostly we have to pay in cash, since for the compensation to the participation of a healthy volunteer, for instance. And this is not really easy on a, I would say, amounts that may be quite important if the involvement of the participant in the PPI initiative is quite important in time.
We help us or kind of take a detour about register them into the how they call it, SAP account as an so-called outbound patient. So let's make it easier than to compensate them for the healthy volunteer. So I don't hope I have to do it with the PPI contributors, because you haven't got an project within the SRP. So we'll see. I keep you updated. I don't really know right now.
But Mark, we could also take up this question when we work on the template for such an agreement arrangement, because I have to admit that for me it's an administrative question, and we have to take it up also in the agreement or in the arrangement that you would then do between the two parties. Yeah. Clarify how this is then working in practice.
Okay, thank you.
I see two hands up from Turan and from Tim. Maybe Turan first.
Okay, no, I just wanted to answer to Marc Fossard, because I work as a patient partner in 3 different places, and at the University Hospital of Geneva. They have a special contract with the patient partners, so I get paid on my account and it works. But it's institutional. I also work for the SAKK, so the Swiss Group for Research on Cancer, and they also have special contracts for patient partners. And I am also paid on my account, and I'm also working for the Laboratoire des Patients in CHUV, and there I am an employee because I have the same work as someone who wouldn't be a patient partner. So it's very different. There is no rule for the moment, and there are a lot of possibilities and a lot of things to clarify still. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that's helpful.
Tim, do you want to speak up?
Yes. So my question would be regarding the qualification of the PPI and how this impacts the compensation. I mean, there's a difference between an individual patient and a carer, or for example, a patient expert or patient organization representative. So how does this impact the budget calculation which you show here? Because let's put it like this, different skills require different payments, right?
Yeah, actually, that's what you can, I'll change the slide to the previous one. That's what you can address in the personal framework. Because here you would look, does the PPI contributor have own experience in living with the disease, or is he a family member or whatever? And you could, take this into your budget calculation. But as I said, it's not a real calculation. So that's why I put calculate into brackets.
But
it's more, an assumption taking the 2 criteria into account.
But just as an example, if you take in the personal framework, you have the highest level, the highest skills needed is directly affected by a condition. But if you have an individual patient in your group and also patient organization representative, and the patient himself is not longer able to work, but still has the highest skill level according to the policy, but the other patient representative is actually doing this as his job on a daily basis. I mean, there are probably different compensations for that, or do all have the same rate?
it's a very specific question. My recommendation would be try to be as fair as possible and not be too complicated. Maybe you can find a solution that both are compensated and it's appropriate for them. There might also be patients working for a patient organization, and then the patient organization claims the compensation, and it doesn't go to the individual who is doing the work, but he's then or she's doing the work on behalf of his or her organization. So there are different possibilities, and as I said before, we are starting with this policy, with these calculations, how to best compensate for the PPI, and it's by experience that we hopefully learn and that we can then come to a proper model and adjust it as we go along. Yeah, I know that this is not a concrete, direct answer to your question, but maybe it helps.
But maybe I could, comment on that too. I would suggest kind of two different, maybe, how do you say, collaboration agreements, kind of for the individual and for the organization. And then if you are on an hourly basis, they get paid when they do the hours. If they're not able to do the hours anymore, maybe they can stop for, I don't know, a few weeks and months or whatever, and then continue work. So this comes along with the disease. So it can be, but it can be, yeah, sometimes a bit you have to be very flexible in that, I think. And you could help, kind of, I don't know, find an agreement for half a year, how many hours they really admit to, or they can provide, depending on the disease they are in. Does this answer your question a bit more, Tim?
Yeah, to a part at least.
Okay, hopefully, okay.
Maybe we can take it up again, Tim, on a bilateral or trilateral level.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
That we can discuss afterwards a little longer. If this would be of help.
Certainly, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions now to the letter of intent, the preparatory budget? Anything that I addressed in this part, because otherwise I would go on to the proposal, the grant submission itself. Okay. Then I would like to address the PPI requirements in the proposal itself. So here again, you have two tables that you need to fill in. The first one relates to the activities you have done before the proposal submission. So what we discussed right now in the letter of intent. And the second tabular overview relates to the activities you now plan during and after your trial conduct. So list number A, the activities that have already taken place prior to the proposal submission. This is actually what you did in your letter of intent, and you can then take over what you stated in the table there in your letter of intent. What is new is the right-hand column here. How did it influence the study submitted? So here you are expected to describe the feedback and the insights you gained from having involved patients and how you integrated this in your proposed study. So what was actually the outcome of your patient involvement up to the submission of your grant proposal? This is in table A, the first table. And in the second table, then comes the activities that you now plan during and after your trial. And here again, you might remember this here on the left-hand side, the phases of your clinical trial. It's exactly what we saw in the graphical design. It's the management now, it's the data analysis, the dissemination and implementation, and the evaluation. Then, as you did for the letter of intent, you describe the activity you are planning to do. Again, you should be as concrete as possible. Really identify what you do and not what you intend to do. You describe the concrete task for the PPI contributor, what you expect, his role, her role, and you specify why you involve patient, what you expect as a benefit, as an added value. So now, coming back to the graphic, we are in the remaining 4 parts of the graphic. Again, I would like to take you through some examples. So the first example would be that you have, the first example would be that you have a patient, a PPI contributor as a member of a safety board or a steering committee or an advisory board. This would relate to the management and study process phase of your trial. The activity would be that you include a PPI contributor, a patient, as a full and active member of your board. Let's say it is a safety board or steering committee or the advisory board. The role of the patient PPI contributor would be to provide input, advice, or recommendation on all questions, on all issues that are put before the board, before the committee, and would also be, as a full member, be eligible to voting. So this would be a case for the level 3 joint decision making. The objective would be to ensure that the patient perspective is taken into consideration for all questions and issues that arise during your study. So you have the possibility via the board, via the committee, to bring the patient voice in. Another possibility would be to have a PPI contributor for the summarizing of your research results. Here the phase is dissemination and implementation. And the activity would be that you consult with local or national patient representatives. You specify them, whom you want to consult or with whom you are in contact, to get their feedback on your lay summary of the research results. You could also specify that parts of the research results are written directly by the PPI contributor. Yeah, that's up to you to decide what you do in your specific case or what suits best to your project or study. The role of the PPI contributor, again, would be to review or draft the summary of your research results in part or completely. The objective relates to ensuring that the lay summary of the research results is readable, understandable to the greater public. So overall, it would lead to greater transparency. And last but not least, in the last phase, evaluation, you could have a PPI contributor when you specify your plan, how to monitor PPI activities throughout your study and which approach you choose. Let's say there could be an approach which is more formative. Here the aim would be to improve the involvement process itself, the PPI process itself, or more on a summative level to demonstrate the impact of the involvement you did, or you could propose a mixed approach, which covers both formative and summative. The role of the PPI contributor would could be that he or she participates at feedback or debriefing meetings at certain milestones of your studies, or you could also include him or her in a monitoring function when you monitor your PPI activities. Again, here it might be useful to have a template, and this is also something we could think of in the network to come forward with a joint template or a template that can be used by somebody who involves patient at this point in time. The objective, improving the involvement process itself, formative assessment, or demonstrating really the impact. I'm sorry, it changed again. Oh no. Or demonstrating the impact of your involvement. Short term, maybe on your informed consent, or for the longer term on retention rates. Here you really need to specify what you would like to evaluate, what you would like to monitor. So these are just a few examples of what you could do in terms of patient and public involvement in clinical research. And I want to be quite clear here, there is no one size fits all. And I think we've seen that now with the examples. It's you who have to define what kind of PPI activities fits best for your project, for your initiative, and what makes sense. And yeah, not everything might be possible from the opportunities that I showed. And please remember that both parties, both you and the SNF and we are all starting with the PPI approach. We are not, it's not a lot of experience that we have. We want to gain that experience, and the essential should be to get started and to build up that experience. And with this, I think I stop my presentation here and to open the question and answers again for the last part, which will now address the proposal itself and the requirements for PPI that you need to fulfill in this letter, in this grant application proposal. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours for questions or statements or whatever.
At the moment, there's nothing in the chat, and I only would like to have a comment just to say, as you said, there's not a one fits all approach, and we don't need to be anxious and be too I don't know, too complicated. There are small things we could do and we could improve everything. So we really need to start now. That's all I.
And by the way, this is also the SNFF's approach. So they are not on the call here on the course today, but they don't expect you to be perfect when you submit your proposals for PPI, how you address it in this year's grant proposal. But yeah, let's start together and improve on how we can best address or involve patients, and then build on that experience and improve our PPI involvement as we go along. Any questions? Anybody who wants to say something, a statement, or I don't see anything in the chat. Then I suggest we break for 15 minutes. So please be back at, let's say, 5 past at 2:35. And then we start again with Silke and look into what a CTC is actually doing and what their approach is. So see you in 15 minutes.
So I think we start off, because it's time, it's 2:35, and I think we start off. I like to give you a really briefly overview how we do support the researchers in Zurich. And as everybody else, or as Cordula already said, I have to manage their expectations too, as we don't have lots of experience or years of experience. We do have experience for managing the IICT calls, because we have lots of requests the last years and manage or try to manage that. But PPI is a new project for us too. So to give you a brief overview about how the CTC is organized, we do have specialized units, as you see circled in yellow, which can provide single unit support for your requests. But for your convenience, we set up a project coordination, which is mandatory since this year for the researchers to manage the requests. So to get into the contact with the researcher and circulate around in the CTC and get back with sound and collected answers from all addressed units. So this is for your convenience, or for the convenience of the researchers, to have one single point of contact and one single point of entry. So researchers are coming to us, can use this pointed out email address to send the requests. And we manage the requests in the order of appearance and try to get the answer as fast as possible. And as I already said, we have experience about managing IICT calls since, I don't know, almost 7 or 8 years. It is always the case that the researchers are coming at the latest days pronounced. So that's why we tried since 2 years to get them more advice or more guidance. So I will here now announced deadlines are based on the deadlines given by the SNSF. So for the letter of intent, please send us the request till the 29th of April, which means, or gives us 15 working days to get every answers from every unit together. For the full proposal, we need a bit more time. We need at least 25 days to get everything in order. As we talked about PPI today, as I said, we are at a starting point. We manage some PPI requests, but not a lot project right now. In 2021, we had a master's student, Deborah Eberle, at the CTC, which did her thesis about patient public involvement. And she did interviews about how PPI is expected in multi-stakeholder settings. So she talked about to patients, to competent authorities, ethic committees, to researchers, and bring that all together. This led us to a symposium we had in November last year, where we had really good discussions about how we can transform this partnership or this relationship into a partnership. And that's why we actually planned to do trainings for the CTC personnel about PPI, about implementation science, about how to write lay summaries and to create our own project about PPI in clinical research. And as already earlier said, we as a CTU, we should be prepared for the questions from the researchers, how they should set up PPI or how they can manage PPI requirements for course. So that's why we started our project. I like to show you right now. This project is has 4 subjects, as you see, and on the bottom, the left side, we can say the PPI platform we like to create, as at the moment there's nothing on the website from the university hospital at all, and even the patient section are really limited. So that's why we are planning to do a PPI platform where information can be found, where the exchange is possible. The second one is the patient-centric general consent we're looking at, as the general consent itself for all the legal requirements is very complicated and detailed, and is hard to understand for researchers and especially for the public and patients. So that's why we are planning to have projects or workshops together with patients and the public to ask questions about what do you really understand about that? What is important to you? What you want to hear from us about research, about your data, about your samples, and so on. The third in blue project is kind of a platform where researchers can look for participants and, on the other hand, can publish the study results in lay summary. As you all know, since last year, it's mandatory already for studies with medical devices. Last but not least, there's a 4th project we are looking at is kind of a matchmaking Cordula was talking about from the UPATI. We try to set up a self-registered website where all the persons who are interested in research can register and can get in touch to researchers, and the researcher, on the other hand, can pronounce their project and looking for persons, for contributors. So, as every clinical study is so unique, we have to have different pathways where we go and get to the patients. And when we have this platform all together, which forms then one big platform, this is a living creature, you can say, as you can add, I don't know, style guides for how to write lay summaries. We didn't talk about yet how to, do's and don'ts about things and so on. So this is then a platform for the patients and for researchers, and so we could get together. This is what the SCTO is looking for in the PPI hub, and this is our aim too. That's why we work together in those directions. At the first point, what we do is in May on the 18th, we have an event for public and patients. Mainly, if researchers come, they're very welcome to get into touch with them and show them our now build up or raised website and do the user testing, and then go back and forwards and adjust it after they give us the feedback. The same what we're doing about patient-centric consent. There will be a workshop about how they understand the general consent and what do they expect. So as I said, we don't have a lot of experience about PPI projects within PPI within research projects as they are coming right now for the IICT calls. Some clinics are doing PPI because they applied for the IICT calls in 21, but some of them are kind of contributing at our PPI project. So we're working all together to find the best solution. That's already about it. What I like to say, as I said, it was a very brief overview what we are doing. And I think we rather take questions and discussing about what we are planning to do or should do in your opinions for the next calls or for next period. Thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions?
So we open the floor for questions in the chat. There is no question, Silke. Anybody who would like to ask directly any questions to Silke? Could also be to the whole presentation now. To Silke first, and then, of course, you are welcome to ask any further question you have to the whole of this course. Mark, you have raised your hand, please.
Yep. It was just a kind of, I would say, curiosity from myself. Does anyone knows a trial within a trial addressing a PPI question? So using the opportunity of trial with a randomized design, but having inserted within this trial a specific trial about a PPI question.
So you are referring to like research on research, Mark?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not aware, but I open up for the whole of the audience. Maybe you have any experience or you know of such a study?
I presume it could be eligible for an IICT, but I'm not sure since it's not directly participating to the IICT, but being inserted within the IICT. So that was the reason for my question.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. It's hard to say. Yeah, probably you should really ask Deborah Studer herself and ask this question, because they're quite responsive in those things. But I think, I don't know, Cordula, what you recommend?
Yeah, I think this is a very specific question, Mark, and I would also recommend you put it directly to the SNSF. I have no answer to this, I have to admit.
Okay, I will share the...
But what I can do, I can put up the next slide, because here you have the contact person at the SNSF regarding PPI questions. Please address them to Deborah Studer directly. Unfortunately, they will not be able to be part of this call, but they agreed to any questions can be submitted to them afterwards. Any further questions or remarks? I know that we have one PPI contributor of the SNSF on the call. This is Chantal Britt. Chantal, I hope it is okay that I mention this directly. Very welcome that you joined the call too. Chantal is actually one of the evaluators from the SNSF that will look at the PPI proposals that are submitted.
And she's a part of our project team too. So she's very good.
I can just confirm that we are not nasty people, and this is a learning process for everybody. And we really appreciate any effort that is made to involve patients. And there is not one solution. You have to adapt it to the question, to the research question you have to answer anyway. So we're really nice people. And and I just want to encourage you to be creative and to exchange with the patients, because I think that's the most important thing. Really talk to the patients, find out who would benefit from the research, and exchange before you file any proposal. And I think that would be my main recommendation. Just talk to the people. I think we're all very keen to share our views and to contribute to the research, because we believe that it will make it better. So,
yeah, thanks a lot, Chantal. Thanks for this valuable comment. And Rome wasn't built in a day, so we will not build PPI in a day, but hopefully in the days that come. So
exactly.
I have a question in the chat from. I can't see the first
full name. Yeah, me neither.
Would you like to speak up? Who has the question? How does it work with the PPI mapping?
It's Pamela. Pamela.
Hi. Sorry.
No, you cannot see. I saw it now. It's my how I'm known with the USB. I'm from Swissco Trial Group, and I was wondering if you have a PPI involved in your project and you are submitting for a grant, if you need to be listed on this PPI mapping, or that you afterwards, or that you have to send it in for listing. How does it work?
First of all, you do not have to be listed on the PPI mapping. This is completely voluntary. And once you have an IICT grant and you have a project running, you can, of course, inform us, and then we will include your project, your study in the PPI mapping list. But that's not mandatory, yeah? And it is not connected.
Okay, so it's optional.
It's up to you, yeah, and it will not happen automatically. So
it doesn't has to be an IICT call. So
it doesn't have to be an IICT call, no.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the PPI mapping initiatives and projects, you will find different. It's not always a study; it's also initiatives. For example, the SAKK Patientenrat is also in there as an initiative, yeah. But it has to be in the scope of clinical research.
Okay, so we have a patient advocacy group, so that will be, yeah, that would meet the requirements for listing.
On our website, we have the contact details, and you can write an email. It will. My colleague Tamara, who is not on the call today, she will take care of it. We will then come back to you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cordula, there's another question from Maria. Maria, do you want to speak up, or should I read it?
Well, thank you. That I am with my cellular phone, it is not working really well. But anyway, no, my question is about the ideal number of participants in the PPI activities.
Yeah, that's an important question, Maria, you are raising, and I don't have a concrete number that I can name here. It depends on your project. I can only give you the advice you should consider like a diverse audience. Yeah, maybe check if there are PPI contributors from different patient populations or also vulnerable patient groups and so on. Make it as diverse as possible to get input from various perspectives in, but I can't give you a concrete number that 5 will do or anything like that. It depends on your project, and as Chantal nicely put it, we are in the learning curve, and any effort is highly appreciated. We don't expect you to have here a perfect PPI right at the beginning.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
There is Anita who has raised her hand. Anita, please.
Hi, thank you very much for this very interesting 2 hours. I have an ongoing question regarding our learning curve. You did mention phase 6 with the evaluation of the PPI activities, and I was just wondering whether you have any suggestions on robust methods how to evaluate the involvement. Are you thinking of like focus groups or Delphi studies, or is it very open?
I have to admit, Anita, that I haven't seen any evaluation work for the moment. Yeah, because when we are starting with the project in Switzerland, and what I know is that there is some evaluation, or some evaluation has done in other countries, like the UK, the Netherlands, and there is literature. You can have a look on the web and you will find something. But it's not like a lot you will find. And I'm fully with you. When we start now, we have to think of monitoring and evaluating as we start. But I cannot tell you what is the best method or what you should do, and then your evaluation will be meaningful and you get a good evaluation of the impact. Yeah,
that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further questions? I'm thinking we are very well with the timing. So I would like to thank all of you who participated for your questions, for your input. That's very valuable, and we take it on. We will run this course a second time in May. So now we can take up some of your suggestions and improve on the performing. You are very welcome to submit your comments afterwards. You can write it to my email address. I've already provided it in the chat. If you have further questions to the IICT call itself, it's Deborah Studer from the SNSF. And with this also, big thank you to Silke for your contribution, to my colleague Debbie, who was working in the background and helped me a lot with the technical issues here, setting up the Zoom meeting and getting the slides on screen. Thank you, Debbie. And with this, I like to end the call with my last slide. That's what I would be wishing for, that we walk the talk together. Thank you very much. And please spread the word. And we are looking forward, or the SNSF is looking forward to receiving your PPI proposals, your suggestions of what to do. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.